Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Williamson, at Williamson NFL. Give me a follow there on Twitter. We're going to talk Steelers defense, specifically defensive coordinator, specifically some really disturbing things that I figured out post-game that I think might be quite fireable, to be very honest with you. I think that a defensive coordinator change is something that I very much condone and needs to happen. And we'll get to that in a second. But as I often do, I'm recording this the night before. The Monday night final wildcard game has not kicked off. The Steelers, though, if in case you don't know, doesn't matter what happens in tonight's game. I know you're listening to this post-game, but they have the 21st pick in the first round. I mean, that's where they're at. Doesn't matter if the Rams win or lose. Doesn't matter if the Vikings win or lose. The Steelers will end up with the 21st pick in the first round, which is kind of where they're always at. You get into the playoffs, you lose in the first round, you basically pick from 18 to 24 in that neighborhood, 22, something in that neighborhood, and that's fine. But there's usually about 10 to 12 big-time players, and you don't quite get those guys. So it's not terrible. You're in striking distance if you're going to move up, et cetera, et cetera. But that's where they're at. Just want to give you that information in case you hadn't already. Another thing I found out today, and now we're going to focus on the defense here. I was really critical of the way Patrick Queen played in this game, and he was bad. And there was a lot of times, not that he went through the motions, but just like hardly did anything on a specific play. And I found out from a very, very good source that he was very, very ill for this game and really shouldn't have been out there. And if you go back and rewatch it, it's very apparent. And I am not making excuses for him or the defense or Terrell Austin, who we're going to get into here. But he was not the only one that was at least under the weather on defense. It's a terrible defensive performance. It was a pathetic defensive performance. It was a poorly coached defensive performance. But I do want you to know that Queen in particular was in really bad shape. And he wasn't the only one that was questionable with illness on this defense. Speaking of personnel, though, there's some other things here I had a real problem with. I understand that Moon is a pretty good special teamer. And that has value. It absolutely does. But I don't understand Preston Smith being inactive. Unless maybe he was as ill as Queen. If so, that's understandable. But I had not heard that explanation. He's a physical dude that was coming off a good game that you traded for. That would have been very useful. And we'll talk about personnel stuff here on the other side. But I don't understand why Preston Smith was inactive in favor of Moon or just period. And the other one is Beanie Bishop hardly played in this game. Why is Sutton on the field at all? I mean, he is just a flat out liability. He's not a good football player anymore. He doesn't run well. He has missed a lot of assignments over the year, obviously. But the fact that they're putting him out there, to me, is disheartening at all. Like, don't they see this? I mean, he can't be out on the field, let alone in a big game against a great offense. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action, the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA and college basketball, NHL to UFC and MMA. Head to BetOnline today to get on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Now, as you know, it's not usually my bag, but I'm going to be highly critical of the Steelers defensive coordinator, and it's not just this game. I don't know what schematic advantages Austin really created for you this year. Other than the Colts, I think that they were about the most predictable defense in the league. Some of which I understand. First off, it worked for 2/3 of the league or the season against the easiest slate of offenses in the league. Remember, I told you before this stretch of losses, they had faced the easiest slate of offenses in the league, and you out-executed them. Cover 3, single high safety, very little blitz, an obscenely low third down blitz rate, an extremely high single high, middle of the field defender. Now, that's what you're built for with Minkah. I get that. I also get that you have a great front four, and I still believe it is, particularly as pass rushers. You should be able to get home with 4. But you can't just keep running the same plays against NFL offensive coordinators and NFL quarterbacks and expect them not to figure it out and get answers. So year long, I really don't see what advantages the Steelers' defensive coaching staff. And hey, I'm not avoiding Tomlin here. He's a defensive-minded head coach. He's to blame too. I don't know what they provided. Okay, so 157 of Derrick Henry's 186 yards were after first contact. Why? Well, first off, he's awesome. And he takes stuff to the house. It's not like you're going to track him down in the open field. So when he gets free, he adds up those after first contact yardage in a big way. A lot of it's him. He's awesome. Great. Okay. But here's where things get goofy for me. And I'll preface these numbers in this observation with one thing. That dating back in Lamar's playoff history, and one game against the Chargers a couple years ago comes to mind. Some of the success that opposing defenses had against Lamar is putting a lot of speed on the field. A lot of people that can run with him. He gets in the open field, 3 or 4 people can cut down his angles. They had Derwin James and like 6 or 7 defensive backs on the field, the Chargers, against Lamar, and it worked well. Flood the middle of the field with fast people. Okay. But those teams didn't have Derrick Henry. And frankly, the stuff I'm going to share with you here makes no sense to me at all. It was obvious during the game on first viewing, but I didn't know it was nearly this bad, which to me is pretty fireable. They're trying to defend big people with little people, is the bottom line. Now, bear with me here. Now, I told you coming into this game, and I was right, and it doesn't take a genius to figure it out. Baltimore was not going to use 11 personnel very much. You knew this coming into the game. They're a very small percentage 11 personnel team, 3 receivers. And their best receiver's out. So you're not going to get 11. But wow, did you not get 11. They used 11 just 11% of the time. That's the second lowest rate of any offense in a playoff game for 5 seasons. Going back 5 years, that's the second lowest rate of any team to ever use 11 personnel in a playoff game. But you shouldn't be shocked by it. And along those lines, this past weekend, no other team was below 50% in their usage of 11 personnel. So this is a really strange way of playing offense. But that's who the Ravens are, and you should expect more of it without their best receiver, right? So instead, so in addition to that, okay, they didn't play hardly any 11. But they went crazy with a 6th offensive lineman, 22.2%. They had a 6th offensive lineman on the field. That's an obscenely high number. The Ravens only did it 2.2% for the season. And usually the team that does it like 4% will lead the league in 6 offensive line usage. I think the Bills are the top of the league right now, and they're around 8. They use it a ton. 22% is bonkers. bonkers. And good for them. Okay. But you have someone in the booth and you see a 6 offensive lineman trot on the field. You know what personnel groups they're in. Adjust to it. And that's not even taking into account Patrick Ricard, who's a 300-pound fullback. So there were many, many, many snaps with a 6th offensive lineman and really a 7th offensive lineman in Ricard, as well as Henry, who's 250, and tight ends. Like, you can't get any heavier on offense without just going goal line on 1st and 10 and the entire series than the Ravens did in this game. They put their biggest people possible on the field on offense. So despite the Ravens going so heavy, this is going to make you crazy. The Steelers played nickel with 5 defensive backs on the field 45% of the time. Still. So here's the breakdown. The Steelers had 3 defensive backs on the field for 16 plays. Okay? Steelers had 4 defensive backs on the field for 22 plays. Okay? And they had 5 defensive backs on the field for 33 plays. 33 plays out of nickel when they're heavy the whole time. Okay, well, what were the results, Matt? I mean, I'm sure none of it was good, right? The Ravens just ripped you apart with, no matter what you did, right? No. So again, there were 40 snaps with either 4 or 3 defensive backs on the field. With 3 defensive backs on the field, the Steelers allowed 3.8 yards per play. That's really good. Really good. Now, I'm sure there's 2 instances where that's 4th and 1 and they get the 1 yard and that brings down your yards per play. But it's still 16 plays where you held them to under 4 yards a play. One of the best offenses in the league. Okay, well, maybe that's a one-off. That's not that many plays. There's only 3 defensive backs out there. How about when you were in base with 4 defensive backs on the field? 4.2 yards per play. You'll take that. You hold the Ravens to 4.2 yards per play on those 22 plays, a large portion. Those 16 plays, you held them to 3.8. Pretty large portion. Again, that's 40 out of 73 snaps that they were either 3.8 or 4.2 yards per play. Well, guess what happened when you had 5 defensive backs on the field? 9.5 yards per play. 9.5. They have a bunch of little people taking on a bunch of big people trying to tackle the biggest dude out there. What do you think's going to happen? Instead of playing with a 5th defensive back, bring in a 300-pounder. Take the Sutton off the field, who's 190, and bring in the guy that's 290. Or play with Preston Smith as your extra defender in the box against 6th offensive lineman. That's all I got, but that's all I think you need. I mean, I think Lamar and Henry and their offensive coordinator, Monken, who's really good, had to be laughing to themselves halfway through the game. Like, we just keep putting big people on the field and they're going to play nickel? What are you doing? I mean, do you really think they're going to throw out of that? No, they're running down your throat. Maybe a series. Okay, let's make that adjustment. Boy, get our nickel back off the field. Get a 3rd corner off the field. Get a 3rd safety off the field. Whatever it was. And put beef out there. Never did it. Now, I'm not saying if they play this entire game with 4 or fewer defensive backs that they would have kept them to 4 yards a play. Probably not. But I bet it's not 9.5. I mean, it makes my jaw drop. how do you not make that adjustment during the game, let alone before the game? You know, a thing that every coaching staff does is, if we get this personnel grouping, we're going to put this personnel grouping out there. Okay. You know, you figure that all out. Everybody knows they have a call. You see the Ricard and an offensive lineman run in the game when a tight end likely and a receiver run out. Okay, we counter that with our 4-4, not your nickel. There you have it. So I do think Terrell Austin's job is in very much jeopardy, and this game is not something he wants to put on his resume. Let's just put it that way. All right, everyone, take care.